Alright, hey guys, I'm finally back to making videos. A fun fact, I actually recorded this entire video just to realize that apparently my software wasn't properly working, so that's 30 minutes down the drain, but whatever. So let's get right into it. Yeah, 30 minutes, I said that. So the reason I'm recording this video is because I played 2 games recently against the same player, a relatively strong opponent, and it was a bit of a deja vu effect, and I think you'll see that in both of these games. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. The games were against a kid named Logan Wu, a very talented young guy. I don't know how old he is. He looks like he might be in elementary school, maybe. But currently he's rated 2100. He was rated 2100 2 days ago when I played him. And he was in the low 2000s in the first game when I played him, so he's increasing pretty fast. So our first game, make sure I have that up so we don't have to restart, was a Najdorf. And so I played e4, and hold up, let's go back over here, okay. After e4, we had c5, knight f3, d6, and d4. Take. So Najdorf Sicilian, as is usual. Don't mind the pausing. We're just checking to make sure everything's looking just fine, which it is. So I played the Sozin variation, bishop c4. Tried that out today. e6, bishop draw it back. Bishop b7. So black's just looking to get developed and get castled pretty quickly. Bishop e3, queen c7, delaying castling, but taking a look at the c4 square. Often the idea is for a knight to get to the c4 square eventually, so nothing too uncommon. I played f3, looking to play perhaps g4, or maybe even queen d2 and make sure the knight can't go to g4. Very similar to a Yugoslav if you play Sicilian. So castles, queen d2, knight c6, and g4. So just starting off the attack, nothing too special right now, Yugoslav. I'm delaying castling because, well, there's no need to castle right now, so why not attack first? It's knight e5, g5. And so the idea here is that knight h5 is actually a pretty bad idea for Team Black. If black goes to e5, then white has this very easy plan of going knight d2, and then let's give black a random move, knight g3, and now black's just lost. If black plays g6, you take twice. The h5 pawn's now hanging, so there's that. And if black takes on g3, well, you take back, the queen comes to h2, black can resign. That attack's going to be crushing. So Logan knows this apparently and plays knight fd7. So now I played f4. And you might say, wait a minute, wasn't the f3 move played so the knight couldn't go to g4? And to figure out how I came to this decision to play f4, we first have to realize that originally what I started doing was looking at sacrifices on the e6 square. Bishop takes e6, knight takes e6. But I very quickly came back to my senses when I realized that if I tried any sacrifices on e6, my f3 pawn would be hanging, and thereby my queen would be hanging, so I very quickly got that out of my system. But I did manage to connect the idea with the fact that g4 is now covered. So in other words, if I play f4 right now, knight g4 would be a pretty bad mistake because I could play knight takes e6, and after take back, take here, king h8, boom, I'd just be completely winning, up 2 pawns, blah blah blah, it'd be over. So I decided to play f4, gain a tempo, and after knight c4, in a matter of speaking, I gained another tempo because I took back, and now I have time to play f5. So I was able to turn that f3 move and accelerate it to get the pawn all the way up to f5, and I haven't even castled yet, but look at how far my attack's already gotten. So the knight came to e5, and only now did I decide to castle. And I decided to castle now because I actually need to. If I rush and play something like h4, then actually queen takes d4 is in the position. And no matter which way I recapture, knight f3 comes in and we trade queens. And I don't want to trade queens. I like my attack too much. Normally they say against kids used to trade queens, but hey, I like to attack. What can I say? So I decide to queenside castle. So b5 comes. Threat is b4, hitting the a2 pawn, so sidestep that. King b1, pretty simple. b4 came anyway. Knight dropped back, and now queen c7. Now, yes, b4 is hanging, but I gotta admit, I think it took till I was going over the game with one of my students for me to realize that b4 was even hanging. Because during the game, I didn't even look at it. Like, the idea of my queen going to that side of the board did not even cross my mind for half a second. Intuitively, just looked so wrong. I get the pawn, but what do? I open up the b file. I tremendously slow down my attack. d5 might come with the tempo. Matter of fact, after queen takes b4, maybe just d5 and taking back on e4, and I don't even win a pawn. So, yeah, taking on b4 didn't even cross my mind. However, knight c4 is now a threat. Queen c7 freed up the c4 square to allow knight c4 to pop in. So I decided I would play queen e1, sidestepping knight c4. Knight c4 came anyway. which in my mind, I think this was a bit of a mistake because I think that knight was required to be on the other side of the board for defense, and I don't really think knight c4 did anything, but we'll see. So knight c4, I played bishop c1. Now the bishop does a great dual purpose role of defending my king, the dark squares near my king, which the knight on c4 attacks, and also helping to aid my king side attack. So now he played bishop to d7. And so now I had a lot of interesting ways to continue forward. One way was pawn to g6. I always tell all my students, the number one way to open lines in chess is pawn captures. So if you're trying to open lines anywhere, create some pawn captures. So g6 was actually pretty strong. Also strong, similar idea was f6. And f6 was really the move I was trying to look at for most of the game and figure out if it could work. After the game, I found with some, engine help, that this f6 was pretty strong here. And I don't quite remember, I looked at this a while ago. I know I should have looked at it before I did this, whatever. I think that on takes, bishop takes, the line went bishop h6, rook somewhere, and then it went rook g1 check, the king moved over, and then I think it was this move queen f2, which obviously is a little bit hard to calculate if you're a human, and also if you're in a tournament game, you're trying to figure out if it's worth going all in. Queen f2 has a simple idea that if the bishop moves anywhere, queen takes f7 comes. And if you try queen d8, I just bring in the other rook. And you should note that knight d2 is covered by the bishop on h6. So needless to say, no, I did not see this in the game. And again, just to reemphasize, if the bishop drops back, or not bishop there, that's too easy to kill. But if, let's say, something like bishop to e4, then, okay, queen f7, and it should be pretty obvious that black's starting to fall to shreds here. Things should not be going well for poor team black. One example line is queen e7. I'm just now seeing I have rook g8. And yeah, that's resigns. So whatever. Anyway, instead, I played a really interesting idea here. A very human move and just, some pure attacking chess. Just rook d3. Take a look at this. The idea is pretty simple. The h-file is not open, but in a matter of speaking, it is. It's not open for the rook on h1, but for the rook on d1, the h-file is open. So I want to play rook h3, queen h4, and checkmate. Why not? Okay, maybe the idea's elementary-ish. It looks kind of caveman, but hey, it's up to black to stop it. And with attacking, sometimes you can just make these pretty obvious threats, and they may look elementary, but when you have to defend them, it's not so easy. So Logan tried his own counterplay with rook a to c8. I honestly think it made maybe a little bit more sense to play rook fc8, whatever. After calculating that I wasn't getting messed up on the c2 square, I just kept going with my plan, rook h3. And now it came take and take back. So I think the reason he took back was because taking allows this bishop to kind of x-ray the rook. So in some lines, this f-pawn might be pinned to the rook. So I think it was a decent decision. Now I played knight e5. And here comes a pretty critical point in the game where I could have blown it. Now, this is why it's very important to be safe. If I would have just looked at the position quickly and just went along with my plan, I would have came to a very rude awakening after the move bishop takes f5, defending the mate threat. And now after knight takes f5, queen takes c2 would come with check, forcing the king to leave, and then after queen takes f5, white would be down 2 pawns with the mate that's not even on pre, and black would just be winning. White would have completely blown a beautiful position. So it's very important to, when you're attacking, always make sure that you're not getting too drawn into your ideas. You have to always look for your opponent's counterplay opportunities and make sure those are shut off before continuing. So here I took a break from the attack and just played the nice calm king to a1, stepping out of the tactic. And also now in future variations, queen takes c2 does not come with check. So this allows me to free up a little bit more of my play. It can save me tempi later down the road, let's say. It takes away a lot of threats. So after king h1, this is where Logan kind of failed, and this is why, again, I say, defending is so tough. He played an idea he thought held, but it just didn't. So he played g6. And so here, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. It's taking advantage of the fact that the pawn is somewhat pinned, but here I was thinking of multiple ideas. One idea I had in mind was rook h6, with the idea of actually coming in backwards, playing rook h6, queen h4, and taking on h7 that way. And I was thinking that was actually going to be very strong. But very soon after, I started to notice something else. And that was that his idea was that after queen h4, which I played in the game, he wanted to play h5. But what I saw was that knight f4 was just completely crushing. Knight f4, again, very caveman, but extremely strong, has the simple idea of, I'm going to play knight takes h5 and take back with my queen at the end, and I'm going to ask you to save your king, and that's what you're going to do about it. And the answer is there's literally nothing black can do. Almost no matter what black decides to do here, knight takes h5 wins. So Logan opted for f6, trying to make things a little bit crazy, but just like I said, knight takes h5 after anything, still wins. If he takes the knight back, we have a similar situation. He's just getting mated. Queen h7 is a threat. G6 maybe is a threat. Queen h8. Queen h8 is not quite a threat, but queen h7 is a threat enough. There's no way to stop it. So he took on g5, and then here comes the move that I was so happy to play, and it's really nice to play over the board. I played knight to f6, and with the queen hanging, the knight hanging by 2 pieces, it's just completely done. You can't take any of the pieces. You can't take the queen because it's check. You can't take the knight with the bishop because I have queen h7, and you can't take the knight with the rook because I have queen h8 first, king f7, and then rook h7. So it's just completely over. After knight f6, he played king g7, and then the question might be, well, how do you continue here? Well, after queen h7, Logan resigned. You might be like, what? I mean, he can run. No, he cannot run. No queen takes g6 is not a threat. However, the really powerful and fun bishop to g5 is. And after the king comes to g5, queen h4 would be a picturesque mate, in which case the king's on g5, white's down 2 pieces, but black king's on g5, black's checkmated, white has done his job in the Sicilian, taking out team black. So that was a very fun beginning game right there. And yeah, it was just really crushing. Again, that idea was just sacking on h5, the attempt to make it a g6. But my favorite part of that game was probably the rook left. My favorite 2 ideas was rook d3, rook h3, and then king a1. Also, I really like that too, because it really illustrated the point of you have to play defense before you can play offense. Okay, so now we come to game number 2, which is after this game is when I knew I had to make a video, because it was just, you'll see, the deja vu that ended up happening. So start off with e4, c5. Okay, just checking to make sure everything's going well. e4, c5, yep. And now knight f3, d6. So again, do another Fischer-Sozin, and now b5. So this is a different move. So I was kind of trying to recall what to do here. I know Fischer used to like castle, play f4, f5, but I looked at some lines with like, I think it was like castle, bishop e3, or no, castle and like queen f3 and queen g3, something like this. But I think I might have messed it up. So I played bishop e3. Because this was a move I looked at. He played bishop e7. So I thought for a while, and I couldn't quite remember my ideas here. And it was starting to get messy. I do remember there were some lines where like my queen was on h4, bishop was on g5. And I do also remember though, with looking at the engine, that those lines really didn't really work out. And that just a3 should be okay. Like, or at least if I tried to attack the line, the attacks really shouldn't work. And that black would get counterplay. But if I played a3, I wouldn't really have an attack, but I'd have a playable position. So since that was the one thing I was sure I remembered, and I didn't want to mess up any tempi, I decided I'd just play a3 right now and just kind of prevent black from playing b4, maybe allow my bishop to drop back, and just keep going from here. So yeah, bishop a3 again, one of the good pawns that allows bishop a2. So queen c7, just like Logan played last time. And I tried this move, queen f3, and it was, I guess, kind of a tricky move. And one of the main ideas with this move is it kind of prevents bishop to b7, because now I would have bishop takes e6, and my idea was that this position right here, I don't know, queen somewhere, would be kind of annoying to play for black. Maybe something like this. Something like this. I would be pretty happy to play this as white. I mean, black just looks like he's going to be having a rough game. I'd be happy if I had a light squared bishop, but hey, I'll play it without a light squared bishop. I mean, whatever. So yeah. So that's my idea with queen f3. Also, the queen can go to g3 sometimes and be a bit of a nuisance with bishop h6 ideas. And then Logan played very quickly, actually. He very quickly played queen b7. And I was like, okay, kind of nervous because after a3, which I kind of just like came up with, and also queen f3, which I just came up with, to have a move reacted to that quickly was kind of surprising. But it also helped reassure me that, hey, you're probably still in books. That probably means you haven't done anything too wrong. So it's okay. So here I had to think again, because like I said, I'm kind of shooting from the hip right now. And I realized that black has a very good and kind of annoying plan here. And one of the cool things about, again, having this queen in f3 is that if the knight comes to d7, so if the knight b to d7, I have, again, taking on e6. If the bishop goes to b7, I have taking on e6. If the king castles, maybe I have queen g3, although that's not much, but that's one of the cool things. Or maybe even e5 in some positions. But again, so long story short, the queen on f3 kind of prevents the knight and this bishop from developing. But after queen to b7, black has a very strong and just, regular idea. He wants to play bishop d7, protecting e6, and knight to c6. The knight on c6 will be annoying because it can hop to e5, attacking my queen with tempo, maybe then swing to c4. The bishop on d7 may come to c6, so if I play knight takes c6, the bishop will take on c6. That's a ton of pressure on e4. And otherwise, like, how am I supposed to create an attack there? I wasn't really seeing it. Even knight c6, knight takes d4, and bishop c6 again just looks like a ton of pressure. So I was nervous. I knew my opponent was at least relatively in book, and I saw this play, and I thought, I just have to do something. I can't just sit here and let it run me over. So I got to come up with something here, and I got to kind of force the issue. So I decided to go for this wacky-looking move, just g4. And g4 is about as blunt as it gets. I'm just going for g5. I'm trying to start making things a bit complicated, make my opponent have to think and pose some problems. So after g4, which again just has the idea of g5 and kicking the knight and going from there, my opponent just castled, which was interesting because normally if somebody throws a pawn like that, I think a little bit before castling. But he castled relatively quickly, like he was not afraid. So I went ahead with my plan, g4, drop back. And after taking some quick peeks at this e6 sacrifice, I really determined it wasn't anything. I mean, I don't really see anything after takes, bishop takes, king here. I mean, okay, queen h5, maybe some g6 threats, but I didn't really see anything here. I mean, even g6 is probably just okay for black. This diagonal is not going to kill black. He's got knight e5, or I don't know. It looks like it might be dangerous, but I don't think it's worth a piece. It just doesn't quite feel worth a piece. Like maybe here, and here I have a queen hanging, a bishop hanging. I probably have to go like here, and I don't know. It just does not feel worth a piece. So anyway, after knight fd7, I thought for a while. So I can castle queenside here, and it looks like the obvious idea. In fact, I'm pretty sure everybody watching this video is like queenside castles. But after queenside castles, I started getting a little bit worried about ideas connected with b4, which comes with a tempo on the a3 pawn. So after we take twice, the queen's on b4. And then a4, a5 comes extremely quickly with that queen on b4. And also, the queen on b4 is not too easy to kick. If you kick it with a knight, I mean, hey, your knight's on a2, so that's not exactly awesome either. And also, after like queenside castles, b4, and queen takes, the bishop comes to b7, then there's pressure on e4, and I don't know, I was just feeling really nervous about b4, knight c5, a5, a4 ideas. So I decided to go with this move, rook d1, and yet now my play just looks all over the place. White has played queen f3, a3, g4, g5, rook d1. Like, those series of moves just do not seem very connected. a3, okay, that has an idea. Queen f3, what's really the plan? g4, g5, and now rook d1. It doesn't look too connected. So at this point, I was feeling shaky. I didn't feel my position was like horrible, but I did feel like it was sketch. Like, I felt like the moves that I was making were sketch, but I was like, hey, we're in it. And I mean, Logan's no easy guy. I know the rating says 2028, but in reality, Logan's live rating was 2100 at the time of this game. So he was definitely not an easy opponent. So I was getting a little bit nervous, but I felt like I was doing what I had to do. So knight c5 came. And as much as I wanted to keep my light squared bishop, I didn't really think it was an option. If I try to play bishop a2 in this position, then I think b4 just starts hurting me. Because after takes, I drop back. The b2 pawn is hanging. The bishop could come to b7, pressuring the e4 pawn. My knight on c3 is currently pinned. Protecting b2 is just awkward. You don't want to play rook b1. So I just couldn't get behind this position. So I decided just to castle and say, hey, if you want to take my bishop, you can take my bishop. I'll take back with the knight probably, or even the pawn, and at least argue that I'm much further developed and go from there. So he ended up playing bishop to d7, a pretty docile move. I didn't really think this was dangerous at all. It doesn't really come with any new ideas other than developing a piece. So here I dropped back and played bishop a2 now, because now b4 is not as painful. b4, take, okay, b2 hangs, but at least the knight's not pinned. And also, I realized afterwards, and I'm looking at it with the computer, that b4 is actually just a blunder. So there's a reason actually that he cannot play it. After takes, which by the way, during the game, I thought this is what he should do, and I was kind of confused when he didn't, but it turns out there's this tactic, knight f5, with the idea that after e takes f5, I have knight d5. and this just hits the hanging bishop on e7, and I'm just doing much better here. The knight's going to become a beast, the other bishop comes to d5, etc., etc. So here he played knight c6, which is the best move in the position. I played b4, also the best move. This is my plan. Now this knight, it has no square, so it's forced to the a4 square, and I'll be more than happy to trade this knight off the board, especially with my bishop still in the game. So up to here, the game's been actually relatively balanced, even with white's weird-looking g4, g5 move. I think that's probably because white's pieces are so well placed that even with that random gain of space, it is weak, and normally, or it's not exactly the greatest idea, but because white is so well developed, white can get away with it and not be that much worse. However, here, black just went terribly wrong. He tried knight to e5. This is just a huge blunder. And the reason is because it simply just gives me a crushing tempo to get an attack going. So knight to e5 centralizes the knight. It looks like maybe it'll go to c4, but the problem is you drop the queen back. The only legal move for the knight to go to is the a4 square. So knight a4, take twice, now just f4. And okay, if the knight goes to g6, f5, so the only real good square for the knight is back. And now you can see basically white's just gotten 2 moves in a row to help his attack out, which is unexcusable. Like, you literally just cannot do this. Even if I paused my attack and played c4 with some positional grip on d4, like, even this move is probably just okay right now. I mean, well, actually, maybe not, but whatever. It's just, this is a bad idea. Anyway, here I went for knight e2, and my idea was simply that, and I played it pretty fast too, and my idea here was that this knight on c6 blocks a lot of his play. His queen's blocked along the diagonal, his bishop can't go to the c6 square, it blocks the c file for his rook, the knight doesn't really have any good squares to go to, so I just felt like this was a really pesky knight for him to keep on the board. You know, that's like, say if you have less space, you want to trade pieces, no trade for you. Also, I felt like my knight could go to g3, maybe help with the f5 square, maybe if I push f5, the knight can go to f4, so I was feeling good about my move knight to e2. However, our silicon engines found that after f5, take, I actually had a few crushing victories here. If e5, I actually can just push forward with f6, and this is absolutely crushing. Bishop d8, and now I have this amazing sequence, g6, just completely opening everything up. You can see the rook, the bishop, the queen, the 2 pawns, everything coming in on the king. Black's just done for. There's absolutely no defense here. Should be borderline resigns. For instance, if takes, yeah, just take back. Ask black how he's stopping you from taking on g7, and yeah, you're going to be having some issues here. So h takes g6, queen takes g6, pretty lights out. Bishop takes, rook takes, and what else is there here? If rook takes, we get this position. And again, this is also just pretty crushing. I mean, just look at it. Optically, it's crushing. And if e takes f5, well, we have just g6. And again, completely game over. G takes h7 is a threat. G takes f7 is a threat. If h takes g6, queen takes g6. And again, this is actually forced mate. You cannot get away from getting checkmated here. So that's that. So after knight e2, though, I didn't see that. I kind of just figured that I was... knight e2 just looked good for strategic purposes, stopping the knight from trading, and I knew I was better here. So he played rook f d8, and now here is where the deja vu begins. You probably already started to notice the pawn formation is very similar to last time with this g5 pawn, the f4 pawn, the e4 pawn, but check this out. I played rook f3 with very similar intentions to last time. During the game, obviously, the games were played about, I think it was even less than a month apart, so maybe even as far as weeks apart. Or was it weeks? It was either, I think it was weeks apart, maybe. I didn't play this game against, oh wait, no, it's been a little bit of a while, but there was still in like, it had been in a recent time. The point was though, like when I made this move, I was kind of chuckling to myself because I was like, psychologically, this has to be torture. I was doing the exact same maneuver. The pawn's on h2, the pawn's on g5, f4, e4. I'm going to put the rook on h3. I'm going to try to get the queen to the h file, and I'm going to go for the exact same attack out of the exact same opening against the exact same opponent and see how he reacts. So here he tried a5, and at first I was confused. I was like, why? But then I thought this was connected with a plan for counterplay. So what I thought he was trying to do was after c3 takes, which was played in game, I thought he might be going for this shot, or at least attempt with knight takes b4. And the idea is simply that perhaps you get some play here with queen takes e4. You're hitting the b4 pawn. b4 is weak. You have a passed a pawn. You got 2 pawns for the piece, and maybe this can cause some distractions for Team White to have to deal with here. So I thought this might have been an option to go with if you're trying to look for play. However, I figured that after knight d4, yes, maybe black has some counterplay, but I have to be winning here. So I wasn't too worried about this continuation, but I thought it was something. For instance, if black manages to get the b4 pawn off the board and avoid from getting mated, maybe, just maybe, black can try to hold and create some fortress super far down the road. But that's the kind of defensive ideas, or the kind of thought processes a strong player looks for. He looks for the best practical chance, not necessarily the most obvious ways to try to defend, because sometimes the obvious ways don't actually work. So after c takes b4, he actually went for bishop f8. It's passively defending, but you can probably guess where that bishop's going. You guessed it, g6 is coming, and yep, similar things are going to happen. So rook h3, what else? g6, there we go. And so now we have this pawn break, f5, which is brewing. So it's on the horizon. And also the rook's on the file as well. Queen f2, queen h4 looks to come. So queen f2 right now. Idea, of course, the queen's going to swing over to the h4 square. And yeah, things are going to get weird if he's not careful. So he played knight e7 here. And this had the weakness of the last move. The knight e7, the idea is, of course, to protect the f5 square. But it frees up the d4 square. So I decided, hey, let's aim another piece at the king. And you can see I have this bishop on this diagonal aimed at the king. I have this bishop on this diagonal aimed at the king. I have the rook aimed as well. There are tactics in the position. For instance, if one is not careful and plays a move like, for instance, queen takes e4, we already have, boom, rook takes h7. Idea being that if king takes, we have queen h4, king g8, queen h8, checkmate. And if something like f6 is tried, well, now queen h4, threatening rook h8. With bishop g7, we can actually take, and there will be a checkmate on the dark squares, courtesy of the queen. So after bishop to d4, instead, he tried h5. And again, we see the same defensive technique tried once again with the rook on h3, and guess who decides to come into the party? The knight. Boom. Knight comes into the party, knight to g3. And again, similar things are coming. That knight and that rook are trained on the h5 pawn. I was feeling better and better about this game as it went on. So now he tried out bishop to g7, and I thought for a while about how to continue, and then I found a really cool forced line. Well, not a forced line, but I found a really cool way to go forward. I took twice and played f5. And the idea was that if the king goes to f8, that's going to lead to just problems because of the pin. So maybe king f8, just take. If the king goes to g8, back here, I can play f6. And after something like knight to c6, I figured something like takes, and probably queen e2. I thought something like this should probably just win. Like, I don't really see what black's going to do about the impending threats. You can't really, there's really no way to get any pieces to that side of the board. So there's that. Although now that I'm looking, maybe he can actually play this, and then maybe queen takes h5, and maybe this, knight g6. But I think after this, I still should be in business. So yeah, I think that doesn't work. And yeah, king h8, of course, just take on h5. You don't have to calculate that. It's just obviously winning. So yeah, none of those things work. So after king takes g7, I played f5, and then here he just blundered. He played a move that I was pretty sure he can play. He relatively quickly played e takes f5. And so here I was actually running pretty low on time, because with the opening madness combined with just setting up this attack, I was burning a lot of time. He was moving relatively quickly, although, I mean, look at the position he got himself into. So e takes f5, I guess he was figuring that I'd either sack on h5 or take back on f5, and he just really didn't see what was happening. Or he may have been betting that I'd play one move that I didn't play. So here I played what I would say is an exclamation mark queen b2 check. And it's important to note that queen b2 is stronger than queen d4, which is maybe what he thought I might play. Because after the king moves, if I try, like, for instance, some sacrifice here, the problem is he can play this, queen a7, and now he manages to trade queens. In this position, it looks like it actually may just be lost because there's some issues with the rook coming down, maybe. But again, yeah, this could be a defensive try. And maybe he saw this and decided that that's why he would take on f5, trying to trick me. However, no, queen b2, on the other hand, is much stronger. So the king goes to f8. And now it seems like you have to be a little bit careful here. And my time was getting low here. I was starting to have probably about 5 or 6 minutes at this point, and thinking, and time's ticking down. So if you go for something elementary, like just bringing the queen in, it turns out this pesky move, knight to g8, just kind of solves every single problem. There's really no squares for the queen to go to that are that scary. Maybe queen h7, maybe something like this, and all of a sudden the queen's just kind of stuck. And I mean, what's happening here? Like, We need to break in further. I'm not saying it's not winning, and maybe it still is, but stuff starts to get concrete problems start to happen. Or rook d7 is coming, rook a7 is coming, and then maybe the pawn moves or something. Who knows? So you have to be a little bit tricky. And then we go back to this position, for instance. Maybe perhaps knight takes h5 also looks pretty good, but after takes, well, the question is perhaps what happens after this. And again, we start to have issues with how exactly are we getting in there. Maybe queen f6, but then okay, now we may have this move come in. Or was it d5 here? It wasn't d5 here. I think this was it. Maybe this. And again, the question is like, well, how exactly are we breaking into this? And so it's not so simple that way either. But with load time, I found that this move just looks crushing. And this just illustrates the point of it doesn't exactly matter the strength of the pieces you're attacking with, it's more about the squares they're attacking. So it turns out, even though the rook is stronger than the knight, that the squares the knight will attack are much stronger and much more important than the ones the rook would be able to cover. So the rook attack actually just absolutely should be completely winning, just winning. And so he took because really there's nothing else to do. So he took and then knight takes. And here I thought it was like forced mate. I didn't really see a way to stop like queen g7, queen takes f7. I didn't see it. And so I was kind of just waiting for him to resign. I had maybe like 3 minutes on my clock or something, and I was like, whatever. And then he played this move, and I was just like, oh snap. All of a sudden this went from like, okay, we have mate in 2 to we have to start calculating again, which isn't exactly the greatest feeling when you have very little time. So looking at the position, and so I started calculating forcing lines. There's queen g7, there's queen h8. The question is of, does it actually matter which one you play, which one's stronger? And so I was thinking, so I decided first queen g7 to me was the strongest. So the king moves over, and now we have bishop takes f7, we have queen takes f7, we have queen h8 again, we have knight f6, a lot of things to consider, but I'm pretty sure I found the most precise route after calculating a bit. I played queen h8, and now knight g8 only move, and then I took, and then we have king e7 only move, and we have 30-second increment here, and I was pretty low on time, especially after thinking before playing queen to g7, so I started blitzing these moves out to gain some time. So queen takes f7, king d8, and now I needed time, so I played queen f8 check, king c7, queen takes d6, king back, and then I played queen f8 again, gaining some time, queen comes back, and now I almost played queen f6, which would have been a humongous blunder. The reason is, if I play queen f6, and the king goes to c7, I can't play queen back to d6 because it's just a draw. He would be able to raise his hand and claim threefold repetition, and then the king would just be allowed to walk. Maybe I'd have to go for like queen c5 here, but if I go queen c5, then he goes king b6. Or, excuse me, I'm saying maybe I'd have to go this, but again, here he's got king b6, and again, the king just starts to waltz away from the attack, and this would be the last thing we want to happen. So after king d8, I thought for a while, just kind of like double checking. I went back up to like 4 minutes at this time, 4 or 5 minutes, thanks to the 30-second increment. So I thought for a while, and then I finally decided that I would play knight g7 as the move I was going to put it in. I know knight f6 also wins, but I thought this was kind of a cool win, and I mean, it just works. I mean, if it works, who cares? And the point being is that if this goes absolutely anywhere, then we can follow up with knight e6 here, and then we just come down, and if you want to be fancy, hey, why not? Boom. This just works as well. So there's that, and I guess the one actual try is you'd have to play queen a7, the king goes somewhere, then you move the rook, but this also does not work. We have knight here check, king has to go here, similar story here, king has to go here. Now we just take this guy for free, and if the king goes to a6, we take the queen with tempo, put the king in check, then probably save our bishop down there. So let's say king b6, but now we have queen to d6, the rook comes down, we have queen d4 check, and we're getting the queen now. No matter where the king goes, whatever, king b5, we just take, and I mean, we just win. Or same story here, we just take. And this is, I mean, it's easy enough. Who cares? So yeah, it turns out actually Logan just resigned after knight to g7. I mean, it was just done. There was nothing more to do. And I mean, at this point, why is even up material in this position, let alone the king position? So yeah, it was just a nice little deja vu effect going out through this game, because we saw some very similar concepts. We see this pawn mass here. We saw the rook lift, rook f3. The rook went over to h3. We saw the pawn come back to g6. Queen was looking at going to the H file. We saw eventually this move F5, which was also displayed in the last game. We have a bishop on A2, which was also, I think that was in the last game, was it? I don't remember, but we have a bishop on A2, strong bishop on A2, and of course, one of my favorite parts, we again have a sacrifice on the H5 square. First, it was the knight to let the rook in. This time, it was the rook to let the knight in. And both times, the queen was working in combination with the piece that ended up on H5. And even though there wasn't a forced mate per se, there was, or I didn't see a forced mate, my intuition was correct. The rook sacrifice was totally worth it, and we were able to find that out by going the most precise route and finding a game-ending sequence. So, yep, that was it for this one. This was, again, the game versus Mr. Wu. And, yeah, a bit of deja vu at the board. It's funny. The same opponent, same attacking style, and it worked both times. So that was just fun, and I thought I would share. All right, so hopefully everything worked out well. Won't have to re-record this one. And until next time.